What is the Wedding Cake House?
The Wedding Cake House is a residency program that's geared towards mid-career artists, although we do really feel that intergenerational connections can be really profound. So we do have a wide span of ages who are able to access that residency program. And it is supported by a bed and breakfast that also inhabits the same building. I think thinking about what it is to be in Rhode Island, to be an artist, and what opportunities there are for you as you are in different stages of your career is something that like we realized there was a lot of gaps in like what kind of resources there were for people who are mid-career to older artists.
And we also started to really look at the history of artist-run spaces, and we kept seeing again and again that felt really in some ways kind of sad to us was that a lot of spaces sort of died or fell apart after founders kind of like either, like left or passed away. What do we need to do to make this something that has, that can extend beyond our tenure? So the big pictures of that are like, it has to be something that can support jobs. For a long time, it was like we both had different day jobs. Pippi worked, till like 3 a.m. I worked doing a lot of admin stuff at AS220. So
I worked till 3 a.m.
as a bartender. So thinking about like sustainability was just getting real about money to a certain extent and figuring out
recognizing labor.
And recognizing labor. We didn't want to kind of be at the endless whims of different foundations, which always felt like such a gamble. And one of the things that I think the model of AS220 teaches is that earned income can be really important for kind of developing an organization on its own terms. AS220 has the bar and like the commercial real estate and all this stuff. And so, we were kind of like, okay, what can we do that can bring in earned income that can kind of support the whole organization, that's sort of connected to the organization. And then we ended up seeing that house and just the pieces sort of fell together. And, especially thinking about how much the city kind of like sells its tourism based on artists, but there's not really a way for artists to be supported by that tourism economy. So it just felt like a lot of the pieces were kind of like making sense.
And the idea was that people traveling would be directly supporting the creation of new works. Artist residency programs are a time for artists to have the time and resources to work and develop projects, and is really sort of the way that funding has changed in this country of how to support artists. So it is often the way that artists get support to work on individual projects.
For the most part, we've leaned into like a group residency model. So the whole house is filled with a group of artists, and that's been really, really great during COVID. The design of this next residency will be that we are all kind of in a hermetically sealed pod for like 10 days together. So, knock on wood, that goes well.
Yeah.
Is there wood under here? I think there is.
Just because of the mic?
Yeah. I'm sorry, don't knock it. Sorry.
So this room, we're actually converting this to an ADA bathroom this year. This room has had many different uses over the years.
Uh-huh.
That's maybe one of our favorite objects. We found it on the street, and it was somebody had written on the dry erase board in permanent marker.
But in the early days, this is where we had the one shared computer, and then someone painted the room all black so that no one would spend too much time on the computer. It was 2001. It's the office, in quotes, the business lounge.
Hey, we have a friend who's shooting some video of the space. Would you be up for them popping into the music room? Yeah. Is that a possibility? Okay, awesome. Right over.
You were just running your lights on.
Are you residents here?
I live here, yeah. Yeah, just come for practice and stuff.
Cool.
Land and that together.
And you get to practice like anytime.
Whenever I want.
Right?
It's really great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, there's a laundry room. Seems not important, but turns out having laundry in-house is like a great thing to be able to have access to. And we have costumes that have been coming down a lot lately, which is nice.
And we initially built this studio to be more of a textile studio, but then once we were done, it became apparent that people were not really interested in working in a room without natural light, so shifted over a little bit more to like storage and fabric storage and laundry. Yeah. upstairs space where everyone lives. When we first moved into the space, this was one big giant open room. So we built each room so that it would have a window in it. They're mostly all approximately the same size, so it's kind of like almost like a row houses of bedrooms. Do you want to see inside?
This is Pippi's studio. So Pippi lived here for about the first
12 years.
12 years, both of us, and then we moved out and maintained studios here.
Kai offered to.
Yeah, Natasha made that for them.
How was so far being here? Like in terms maybe of your work, did you feel more comfortable?
Oh, it's a dream. I feel like I'm able to focus on like music in a way I haven't been since like maybe high school, you know? I'm not like juggling too many things, so it's really nice to just be like head to grindstone all the time. No, it's really, really special. Like it's incomparable. I don't know of another space like this.
Thanks so much, Kai.
Oh, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Oh wow. So what? Please, can you say that again? Sorry.
Oh, just the building had been a library before we came upon it, and so it had already had all these shelves in it.
Yeah, the building had been the neighborhood library up until through the 70s when they passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And because the library had inaccessible facilities on second and third floors, they moved the library down the street. And then this building, and it had many other businesses here. It had been like light jewelry manufacturing for a period of time, and had been a church. So it had many different lives.
Oh, so there's actually been a lot of people here who went on to have careers in library sciences, and so it sometimes shocks me how organized it actually is. A lot of the books came to us through a few very specific donors, and Fort Thunder was an art space that was active right before we started here, and they had a library and gave us a lot of stuff from that. Newspeak, owned ARC, who also used to put out this magazine Paranoia, was a nationally syndicated conspiracy and paranormal reader. I think kind of a under-celebrated Providence legend. And then we also hosted Books Through Bars here for a number of years. So
Who's this person?
Shawa. The space has been around long enough that we used to have like an actual landline with a listing in the phone book, and we couldn't figure out like whose name to list it under. So we made up the name of a fictional person who lived here named Anita Shawa. Get it? Sorry.
Anita Shower.
So she became kind of like our collective alter ego. I mean, even before she'd seen better days, she had seen better days. But remember when you could do things in a space like this and have like 25 people? Now I would imagine a space like this would be like 7 people. Yeah, and it took us a while to, I think this is also a great kind of like approach to the question you just had about how understanding of the space or approach to the space has changed over time. Like I think it took us a while to realize that the space itself is sort of an archive and an installation project.
Something that we've also been thinking about, the space is also an archive, and actually creating a searchable way that people could access the different artists' works that are here, and also for us to document them.
So we're starting to kind of like understand that more and approach things with that understanding, and have like talked about like ways of, you know, making sure that there still feels like there's open space for new artists to kind of approach and change. And
when we first started, we were thinking a lot about like who gets to tell a history and like what those objects or what gets documented, and you know, that was something that was like in our consciousness very early on, but I think we were thinking that more in a sense of like collecting books for the library, and it was only after time of artists altering the space organically and like realizing that there was all these other artworks here that it sort of shifted into this other material archive aspect. And this this room is obviously just so bright and beautiful, we wanted to make sure that it was shared space. And so it actually has many different uses over time. So we have, it is, part of it is a kitchen, part of it is just also a hangout space. It's a place where people can work on larger projects, like maybe a quilt or some fabric they need to spread out on the floor, but also it's a place where we've had events. So anything from music or performance events to also hosting things like secret restaurants and yeah, all sorts of different types of events.
And like when we first started the space, it was 2000. Like when we started out running this space, we actually had like a quota. Like we were like, nobody can book a show here or can play a show here unless there's like at least one woman performing as part of that show, which people thought was bonkers. And we were like, are you kidding? Like it was hard.
Yeah.
And now, like, you don't go to a show at Providence where there's like at least half the bill's women, or if, you know, so it's like, it just feels like there's such a significant change in terms of how women are integrated into every aspect of like creative, like everything creative inside of the city. And that feels, you know, I'm not saying that's something that happened because of us, but it also feels like, you know, we got to be a part of a change that feels, you know, like there's been a huge movement. And it's exciting to see, you know, people kind of move the needle around racial equity in this moment too, and to kind of start thinking about those issues with the same kind of intention that I think we were addressing gender, you know, 20 something years ago. And so all these things feel really exciting and possible. Like I might have been more depressed during like 2020 if I wasn't like, oh, I've actually seen the needle move, and I've seen it move in tangible ways because I remember where things were when we first started, and I know what they look like now. Which is not to say that there's like not a lot of work to do on a lot of different levels, but there is something really like that really I think helps keep me motivated by kind of like having these markers for those different kind of moments of change in tangible ways.
How do you approach decision making in collective settings like the Dirt Palace? How is the distribution of power? How do we take decisions together?
You know, there were certain ideas that we had about collectivity and decision-making processes that were super idealistic, but not necessarily grounded in the realities of who had power and what agency people had. You know, we're in a position of responsibility and power, but part of that is also that we can't expect necessarily everyone who lives here, it's not in their best interest to have to worry about if the plumbing breaks, because they don't own the building, and that they should be taken care of and not have to worry about that. So I think that like how we've distributed what decisions are collective versus what are maybe organizational is recognizing like the emotional and labor of making all those decisions.
You know, there's like a very concrete thing where it's like, okay, there's a board of directors, and here's,
Right.
you know, that body is responsible for certain things. We now function as staff, and we're responsible for another cadre of things. And then there are people who live at the Dirt Palace who are like residents/members, and there are really specific things that they make decisions about. And you know, we did start out with consensus, and we do try to talk things through, but also kind of, you know, came to moments where we were like, sometimes like we don't want to be at a meeting for 4 hours, and it just need to like kind of like take a straw poll and be like, where are people at with this, you know, and like how upset are you going to be if it doesn't go the way that you're hoping it does.
Yeah, I think we like work towards consensus, you know, figuring out when people have very different needs, what is the best course of action can be like very difficult and painful, and you know, can be coming from people having a huge amount of respect from each other, but also just having very different realities.
And we get nerdy, and like we have a document called Occupancy and Consciousness where we have like lots of links to like, here's how consensus has worked in different moments. And you know, like we generally work with like an unpure consensus model, like, which I think a lot of, you know, so consensus like kind of comes out of a few traditions, including like Quaker meetings and a lot of a variety of different approaches. But and some are very purist about it, where one person who says like no can kind of block anything from moving from the status quo. And so that's not the model we work with. We work with something that's quite a bit actually, I'd say, more flexible than that.